My name is Maribel Quinn, and for 42 years this little blue house at the end of Cedar Lane has been the keeper of my life. I planted my first rose bush here. I raised my daughter here. I held my husband's hand for the last time here. Every floorboard knows my footsteps. Every wall knows my tears. So imagine the kind of unease that crawls up your spine when your own home begins to feel wrong. It began with the silences, the way conversations between my son Calvin and his wife Renee would melt away the second I entered a room. How Calvin's phone would vanish into his pocket, how Renee's smile, once soft and warm, turned rigid, stretched, rehearsed. I tried to ignore it. At 66, I told myself I was being paranoid. Loneliness can do that to a woman who has buried her husband and watched her only daughter move to another state, but no. This wasn't loneliness, this was something else. Something alive. Something lurking. And then came the night I heard footsteps. Quiet. Hurried. Slipping past my bedroom door close to midnight, I crept out only to see my daughter-in-law usher a stranger inside my home. A young woman carrying a small overnight bag. Renee hugged her like they were old friends, took an envelope from her hand, and guided her straight into the room that once belonged to my husband and me. The room she had sworn had a mold problem. That was the moment my heartbeat changed. The next morning they lied effortlessly. "Oh, we slept so well," Renee said. "Like logs," Calvin mumbled. And I sat there stirring my tea, pretending I didn't feel my whole life cracking like thin porcelain. But I'm not a fool. I knew something was happening in my home. My home. And whatever it was, they didn't want me to know. So I did the one thing no one expected from an old lady with silver hair. Knitting hands and a quiet voice, I faked a trip. I packed a suitcase loudly, dramatically. I called my sister in front of them and spoke of trains and breakfasts and plans that didn't exist. I kissed my son's cheek. I hugged Renee. I thanked them both for taking care of the house. Inside, I was swallowing fire. When Calvin insisted on driving me to the station, I let him. When he hugged me goodbye, I studied his face. Was there guilt? Fear? Regret? No. Only relief. 20 minutes later, when his car had disappeared down the road, I slipped out of the station, took a cab, and went straight to the only person who'd never lied to me in his life, my elderly neighbor, Mr. Harlow. What he told me made my blood freeze. He placed a shaking hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Maribel, wait until midnight. That's when you'll finally see what's happening in your house." He was right. Because what I saw that night shattered something in me forever. But before I tell you what happened at midnight, you need to know the real story of how my home became a battleground and how the people I loved most started treating me like a stranger. Before I tell you what I witnessed that night, I must take you back a little, back to the months leading up to it. Because betrayal doesn't appear suddenly. It grows quietly, like mold under wallpaper, spreading long before you smell it. After my husband Elliot passed, grief hollowed the house. The laughter he brought, the safety he created, it all left with him. Calvin moved in 2 weeks later to help, or so he claimed. At first, I believed it. I held on to that fragile hope that my son simply wanted to make sure I wasn't alone. But what began as help slowly turned into ownership. It started with small things. Calvin began handling the mail before I could reach it. Then he insisted on managing my bank account, telling me, "You don't need to stress about bills at your age." My age? Funny how those words can make a mother feel like a child again. Then, rooms in my house began to close themselves off. My studio, where I'd painted for 20 years got emptied for repairs. My sewing room became a storage space, and Elliot's study was declared too dusty for me to enter. Every time I asked a question, I received a smile instead of an answer. And somewhere along the way, my son stopped calling me Mom and began calling me Ma. Short, flat, transactional Renee, who once hugged me as if she meant it, started addressing me with the same tone she used on customer service representatives. It stung, but I swallowed it. Because love makes a mother tolerate storms she should never have to weather. Still, I knew something was changing. I could feel it in the air, like a room that's been rearranged without permission, but nothing prepared me for the slip-up that exposed the truth. One afternoon, I overheard Renee talking on speakerphone. Yes, bedroom's already cleared. The papers will be ready once the appraisal comes back. We just need her out. Trust me, she won't last much longer. The words hit me like cold water. Her out. Won't last much longer. I stood very still in the hallway. I didn't make a sound. I knew enough to know I wasn't supposed to hear that was the moment I understood. They weren't planning around me. They were planning without me. That night, while they slept, I walked through my own home in the dark, quietly, slowly, touching every memory they were trying to erase. Every painting, every photo, every crack in the floorboard Elliot once tried to fix. I placed my hand on the kitchen table where we raised our children, and for the first time, I felt like a guest in a place I had built. By morning, I made my decision. I would pretend to leave and return when they least expected it, because the truth wasn't hiding, it was waiting. And when midnight came, I finally learned exactly what my son and his wife had been doing in my house while they thought I was gone. Midnight has a strange way of revealing the truth. It softens the noise of the world, strips away the performance people wear in daylight, and leaves only what's real or rotten. I remember sitting in Mr. Harlow's dimly lit living room that night, his old clock ticking louder than usual, each second pulling me closer to the answers I feared. He kept glancing at me with a sorrow I didn't yet understand. "Stay behind the hedge," he warned gently. "Don't make a sound." I promised him I wouldn't. When the clock struck 12, I slipped out the back door and crept across the lawn toward my house. The moon was heavy and bright, almost too bright for secrets, but perhaps some truths want to be seen. My heart pounded as I reached the hedge near the kitchen window. I expected to see darkness quiet. Maybe my son watching TV or Renee scrolling her phone, but instead, the kitchen lights were blazing like midday, and voices, multiple voices, buzzed inside. I leaned closer. There were 6 people gathered around my dining table, the same table where I had served birthday cakes, Thanksgiving feasts, late-night cocoa for frightened children. Now, strangers sat at it. Not friends, not family. Strangers. A tall man in a gray suit spread out blueprints across the table. "Once she's placed in assisted care, the property transfer will go through clean," he said, tapping a pen on the paper. "Good," Calvin replied. My only son. Not nervous, not hesitant, confident. My chest tightened. Renee chimed in, flipping through a folder labeled Estate Preparations. "The moment she's out, we start renovations. Investors want the property before summer." Investors. They weren't helping me. They weren't protecting me. They were planning to sell my home, my life, and they needed me gone to do it. Another woman at the table laughed softly. At her age, it won't be long anyway. Every voice felt like a blade carving pieces out of me. Calvin added, "Mom trusts me. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. She's weakened. Weakened. A word for wilted flowers, not for mothers who raised you. My fingers curled into the hedge so tightly I felt the thorns. The man in the gray suit asked, "And you're sure she left for her sisters?" Renee nodded. "She should be halfway to Blue Meadow by now. We made sure of it." Made sure of it. They didn't wave goodbye as I boarded the bus earlier. They waited for me to leave. Waited for their plan to bloom. The room erupted in clinks and laughter as they poured champagne. "In advance," Calvin toasted, "to our new beginning." And I realized then, they weren't building a new beginning. They were burying my last one. I stepped back from the window, breath shaking, tears burning hot against my cheeks. I thought the truth would hurt. I never imagined it would break me. But as I stood in the shadows of my own home, I realized something even more terrifying. What they planned next would go far beyond selling the house. I stayed hidden behind that hedge long after the champagne glasses emptied, long after the laughter softened into whispers. I waited until each stranger walked out my front door carrying folders, measuring tapes and promises of profit. My son walked them out like a proud host, shoulders back, chin high, never once glancing toward the darkness where I stood watching. When the last car pulled away, Calvin closed the door behind him, and for a moment, there was silence. A silence I recognized. The kind that follows a choice. I waited. I needed to hear more. Through the window, I saw Renee stacking the papers, her brows pulled tight in concentration. She spread them across my kitchen counter. The counter Elliot and I built by hand our first year of marriage. There, under the bright overhead light, I could finally make out the headings on the documents. Power of attorney, medical transition, recommendation, long-term care, consent form, property transfer to surviving heir. All filled out, all signed, all dated that week. But the signature on the bottom line was mine. Except I had never held that pen. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth. My own name, forged in a shakier version of my handwriting, just believable enough to pass. If no one looked too closely, Renee sighed in satisfaction. "I told you she wouldn't question anything. She barely reads the mail." Calvin leaned against the counter, arms folded. "She's getting forgetful. Last week she asked me twice where her pillbox was." My pillbox? He had moved it himself. "She's slipping," he continued. "The evaluator will see that. Once they do, the court won't hesitate. Court, evaluator, papers." It clicked painfully, piece by terrible piece. They weren't just selling the house. They were preparing to declare me unfit. Not sick, not confused, not in danger, just inconvenient. A burden. Renee slid the final document into a folder. "The representative from Silver Grove Assisted Living will come Thursday. Once she's placed, the buyers can walk through." Placed like an object, a piece of furniture. I pressed my palms to the cold grass, feeling as though the earth itself might split beneath me. Then Calvin spoke the sentence that carved itself into my bones. "Once she's admitted, we can clear everything out. Honestly, it's easier if she doesn't come back." Easier. That was what I had become. An obstacle. A complication. A mother who had poured her life into a boy who now wanted her tucked away like an old sweater. I forced myself to stay silent, to stay hidden, to stay steady. But inside me, something old and fierce lifted its head. Not anger, not even heartbreak resolve. I turned away from my glowing kitchen window and walked back toward Mr. Harlow's porch. The night air cold against my cheeks. If they wanted me gone, if they wanted my voice silenced, if they wanted my life signed away. They were about to learn just how wrong they were about me, because by the next morning, I would uncover a secret in my own home, one they had overlooked that would change everything. I barely slept that night on Mr. Harlow's old couch. The truth I had uncovered sat on my chest like a weight I couldn't shift, pressing down each time I tried to close my eyes. By sunrise, I knew there was no time to crumble. I needed proof, real proof, to stop whatever Calvin and Renee were planning. But where do you look for answers in a home that no longer feels like yours? The answer came from a memory. One so small, so ordinary, I almost dismissed it. Years ago, long before illness touched Elliot, long before grief took the softness from his eyes, he once told me that a house should keep a secret or two. Something only the walls and we know, he'd said with a mischievous smile. At the time, I'd laughed. What secret could wood and plaster possibly keep? He winked. You'd be surprised. That morning, those words pulled at me like a thread. So as soon as Calvin and Renee left the house to run errands, I slipped in through the back door like a stranger breaking into her own life. My feet moved slowly, deliberately. I walked through each room, noticing the changes, my photos missing from the hallway, my knitting basket shoved under the console table, my bedroom door halfway open as if waiting for someone else to claim it. But it was Elliot's old study, the room they had declared too dusty, that drew me in. The sunlight through the blinds carved long stripes across the dusty floor. His desk still stood in the corner, but papers were scattered across it now, notebooks tossed aside, drawers left carelessly open. Calvin and Renee had been searching. That much was obvious. But they had missed something. I walked to the left side of the desk, an old oak thing Elliot had sanded and stained himself. In the second drawer, there used to be a false bottom. I had forgotten all about it until that morning. Elliot installed it years ago to hide Christmas gifts from the grandchildren. My hands trembled as I emptied the drawer. Beneath a layer of receipts and dusty pins, I felt it, the faint ridge of wood that wasn't supposed to be there. I pressed gently. Click. The false panel lifted. Inside lay a leather-bound folder, thick with paper, sealed in a plastic sleeve as if protected from time itself. My heart stumbled. I pulled it out and opened it slowly. Inside were documents I had never seen before. A joint ownership deed bearing both our names. Mine listed first a financial agreement stating that Elliot invested using funds provided solely by Maribel Quinn, signed and notarized. A letter, handwritten in my husband's clean, steady script addressed to whoever needs the truth when I'm gone. My breath caught. In the letter, he wrote, "If anyone ever tries to take this house from you, show them this. You kept this home alive. You saved what I could not. I may not have said it loud enough, but nothing here existed without you." Tears slid down my cheeks before I could stop them. All this time, I thought I had faded quietly into the background. But my husband had seen me. He had known. He had protected me long before anyone thought to threaten me. And then, tucked in the back, was a final page. A copy of my signature, clear, strong, unshakable, not the trembling forgery Calvin had used. I pressed the papers to my chest. I finally had proof. Proof they didn't know existed. Proof they couldn't bury or twist. And suddenly, for the first time in weeks, I could breathe again. But before I could use those papers to save myself, I walked into something I never expected. Something happening inside the house that nearly made me drop every document in my hands. I held the folder to my chest as if it were a heartbeat. Steadying, reassuring, alive. For a moment, everything inside me softened. Elliot had seen me. He had known I was the one holding our life together. His letter, his handwriting, felt like a warm hand on my back saying, "Stand up, Maribel. You are not as small as they think." But that moment didn't last, because as I stepped out of the study, documents carefully tucked inside my coat, I heard voices coming from the living room. Not the light chatter of people passing time, but low, urgent whispers. I froze. Calvin and Renee were back earlier than I expected. I slipped closer, staying behind the wall, peeking just enough to see them standing by the mantel. My mantel, speaking in tones too sharp to be innocent. Renee was pacing. "She's been asking too many questions," she hissed. "If she starts poking around the house, she might find something." Calvin rubbed his forehead. "She won't. Mom barely remembers what day it is." I pressed my lips together. Forgetting a date twice is all it takes for a child to rewrite their mother's entire mind. "But what if she remembers the appointment?" Renee snapped. "The evaluator said she showed hesitation last time." Calvin sighed. "She's old. Hesitation is normal." Renee stopped pacing and looked him dead in the eye. "No, Calvin. Old is one thing. Suspicious is another." She lowered her voice. "If she fights this process, the transfer gets delayed, and if it gets delayed, the buyers might walk." Buyers. There it was again. That invisible auction of my life. Calvin leaned against the couch, jaw tightening. "I just need her to sign the medical release. Once that's done, they'll move her into Silver Grove, whether she likes it or not." My breath hitched. Silver Grove. A memory flickered. An article I once read about that facility. Understaffed, under-regulated, a place where people were placed and forgotten. My son was planning to leave me there. Renee crossed her arms. "Did you practice her signature enough?" My heart stopped. "Yes," Calvin said. "It looks shaky enough to pass. One stroke is slightly off, but no one will notice." A fresh, hot shock ran up my spine. They weren't just forging a signature, they were forging me. Renee stepped closer to him. "Then we need to speed things up. If she gets help from anyone, your sister, the neighbors, anyone, it'll ruin everything." My sister, my neighbors, anyone. They weren't just boxing me out of decisions. They were cutting me off from the world. Then Renee said something so cold it made my knees weaken. "We need her confused on Thursday. Emotional, off balance. The evaluator needs to see her fragile. Do what you have to do. Do what you have to do." My hands clenched at my sides. My son nodded, not confused, not horrified, just compliant. "Fine," he said. "I'll handle it." I stepped back, heart pounding, breath shallow. They didn't see me, but I saw everything. And I knew then, if I stayed quiet any longer, they would erase me completely. So, I made a decision that night, one that would turn their entire plan upside down before they even knew what hit them. When I finally slipped out of the house, the folder pressed tightly under my coat, my breath came in shallow bursts. Not from fear, no. That emotion had been burned out of me long before that night. What I felt now was something older, sharper, a kind of strength that only mothers who've been underestimated too long ever learn to carry. By the time I reached Mr. Harlow's porch, the sky was bruised with evening. He opened the door before I could knock. "Did you find what you needed?" he asked. I didn't speak at first. I simply held up the folder, my proof, my shield, my salvation. His eyes widened. Good Lord, he really tried to... He's not done, I whispered. They're planning the evaluator visit on Thursday. They want me confused, shaken, emotional. They want me to fail. Mr. Harlow frowned, anger simmering beneath his wrinkled expression. We can't let that happen. We won't, I said, surprising even myself with how steady my voice sounded. In that moment, I knew what needed to be done. I could not fight lies with tears. Not this time. I had to meet cunning with clarity, deceit with documentation, betrayal with strategy. Just like Elliot always said, a mother's quiet mind is her sharpest weapon. The next morning, I dressed carefully, a soft blue sweater, my good wool skirt, and the pearl earrings Elliot gave me on our 10th anniversary. The ones Calvin insisted I misplaced. Then I walked, head high, to the local clerk's office with Mr. Harlow by my side. The young woman behind the counter raised her brows when I placed the folder down. I need these scanned, time-stamped, and certified, I said. She flipped through the documents, her eyes widening. These are significant, ma'am. I know, I replied. Are you preparing for a case? No, I said softly. I'm preparing for a truth. Next, I visited my doctor. The one Calvin never bothered to meet with. I shared everything. My memory tests from the past year, all normal. My evaluations, clean. My medical history, stable. The doctor listened, horrified. They're trying to claim cognitive decline? She asked. They are, I said. She typed quickly, her jaw tight with outrage. I'll have a full cognition report ready within 24 hours. You'll pass with flying colors, Maribel. You're sharper than half the people who work for me. I nodded, swallowing the sting of gratitude. Then came the most important step. I visited an elder law attorney, a woman with silver streaks in her hair and eyes that missed nothing. After reading Elliot's letter and the forged documents, she leaned back in her chair. They think you're alone, she said. But you're not, and they won't see this coming. Together, we crafted a plan. Not loud, not dramatic, but powerful. A plan that would use their lies against them. A plan that would expose every forged signature. A plan that would show exactly who was unfit to manage anything. And then she said the words that allowed me to sleep for the first time in weeks. When the evaluator comes Thursday, I'll be sitting right beside you. I closed my eyes. For the first time, I wasn't fighting alone. But even with all my preparations, nothing could have braced me for what happened the night before the evaluator's visit. When Calvin crossed a line he could never come back from. The night before the evaluator's visit was unusually still. The kind of quiet that feels staged. Like a curtain drawn moments before a performance, I slept lightly at Mr. Harlow's house, half waiting for the sun, half bracing for the storm. Around 9 p.m., I heard a knock on the door. Sharp, impatient, too familiar. Mr. Harlow opened it cautiously. There stood Calvin, not my son, the boy who used to bring me wildflowers and crawl into my lap after nightmares. No, this was a man with fire in his eyes, jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might crack. Is my mother here? He demanded. Mr. Harlow stepped forward just enough to block the doorway. She's resting. Calvin scoffed. Resting? She's making things worse is what she's doing. I stepped forward then, unable to hide any longer. Calvin, what are you doing here? He turned toward me so fast that Mr. Harlow flinched. Why didn't you take the trip? He snapped. You told us you were going to Aunt June's. I changed my mind, I said calmly. His nostrils flared. You didn't tell us. You didn't update us. You just disappeared. Disappeared? I repeated, my eyebrows lifting. You drove me to the station, Calvin. You hugged me goodbye. He swallowed, caught off guard for a split second before recovering. You should have called. I didn't think I needed your permission, I said softly. That was when he stepped closer. Too close. The shadows from the porch light cut across his face, making him look like a stranger wearing my son's skin. You're messing everything up, he hissed. The house is in chaos. The paperwork is ready. The evaluator is coming because you agreed. I felt my jaw clench. I agreed to nothing. And you know that. He blinked. Hard. That was the moment he realized I had seen too much. His eyes darted, calculating, cornered, desperate. Mom, listen. You're confused. You've been stressed. You're remembering things wrong. There it was. The script. The quiet manipulation wrapped in concern. But I wasn't the same woman I had been a week ago. Calvin, I said, meeting his gaze. I'm not confused. He opened his mouth, but I kept going. And I know about the forged signature. His face drained of color. I know about the evaluator, the papers, the buyers, the lies. A twitch flickered in his cheek. And I know what you said about putting me in Silver Grove. He stopped breathing for 3 full seconds. Then he whispered, Who told you? No one, I replied. I listened. His eyes burned with a strange mix of anger and fear. You're ruining everything, he whispered. And you nearly ruined me, I answered. For a long time, we stood there, mother and son, on opposite sides of a truth neither of us could undo. Finally, Calvin spoke again. Fine, if you won't cooperate. The evaluator will see exactly what we mean tomorrow. He turned sharply and walked away, the gravel crunching under his steps like broken glass. Mr. Harlow closed the door slowly, the weight of the moment settling between us like a thick fog. Are you all right? He asked. I nodded, but inside, something shook. Not from fear, from mourning. I had seen my son's true face, and it wasn't the one I had raised. But what none of us knew was that the evaluator's visit the next morning wouldn't just expose Calvin. It would unravel a truth that even I wasn't prepared for. The morning of the evaluation arrived with a strange tension in the air. Thick, charged, expectant. Even the birds seemed unusually quiet, as if they sensed the world was about to tilt on its axis. I dressed early, smoothing my cardigan, tying my hair back neatly. Not to impress anyone, but to remind myself who I was before fear tried to shrink me. Mr. Harlow drove me back to my house. Calvin and Renee were already waiting outside, both dressed far too nicely for a simple cognitive check. They stood shoulder to shoulder, united in their performance. Renee's smile was sugar-coated poison. There you are, Maribel. We were worried. I met her eyes without blinking. No, you were preparing. Her smile twitched, just for a moment before she could recover. A silver sedan pulled into the driveway. A woman stepped out, mid-50s, steel gray hair twisted into a low bun, clipboard tucked under her arm. Her posture alone said she missed nothing. Good morning, she said calmly. I'm Dr. Linton, state evaluator. Calvin's tone shifted instantly, bright, courteous, rehearsed. Doctor, thank you so much for coming on such short notice. We've been very concerned about my mother. Dr. Linton didn't smile. Instead, she turned to me. And how are you feeling today, Mrs. Quinn? I paused deliberately. Capable, I said. clear-minded and ready. Something flickered in her eyes, approval perhaps, or recognition. Inside, the house was staged like a hotel lobby. Fresh flowers, wiped counters, no clutter in sight. They had scrubbed every trace of normal life away, preparing for their performance. Dr. Linton motioned for us to sit. "Before we begin," she said, "I want transparency. I've reviewed the preliminary papers your son submitted." Calvin nodded confidently. "Yes, I gathered everything you needed." She held up the papers between two fingers like they were contaminated. "That's what I want to discuss." Calvin's smile faltered. Dr. Linton turned to me. "Mrs. Quinn, did you sign a medical consent form last week?" "No," I answered. She nodded. "That matches what I suspected." She placed the papers on the table, right in front of Calvin. "These signatures are inconsistent with Mrs. Quinn's writing. The pen pressure, stroke direction, and formation errors indicate deliberate falsification." The room went silent. Renee froze. Calvin's pulse visibly jumped in his neck. "I'm sure there's a misunderstanding," he began. "No," Dr. Linton cut in smoothly. "There is deception." Then she opened a folder of her own. "These documents were delivered to my office at 7 a.m. this morning, certified, time-stamped, and legally validated." She slid them toward me Elliot's letter. Our joint deed, the financial agreement, my real signature, everything, the truth, delivered in neat, irrefutable pages. Dr. Linton continued, "Mrs. Quinn, based on this evidence and your medical records, there is no indication of cognitive decline. In fact, your physician's report states you're exceptionally stable for your age." Calvin's mouth hung open, Renee's face drained to a ghostly pale. Then, Dr. Linton delivered the strike they never saw coming. "I am also a mandated reporter. Forging medical documents to commit involuntary placement is elder abuse. I've already contacted the authorities." The silence shattered. Calvin stumbled to his feet. Mom, please." But I held up a hand. He froze for the first time. He saw me not as someone to manipulate, but someone he should never have betrayed. And just when I thought the worst was behind us, the doorbell rang. And what came next shattered what little remained of our family ties. The doorbell rang with a force that made all three of us jump. Not a gentle chime, not a visitor's knock. It was sharp, decisive. The kind of ring that announces consequences. Renee's hand flew to her mouth. Calvin looked at the door like it might swallow him whole. Dr. Linton folded her hands calmly. "That will be the officers. Please answer." I stayed seated, still, composed, because the moment no longer belonged to fear. It belonged to truth. Calvin opened the door with trembling fingers. Two officers stood there, badges out, expressions stern. "Calvin Quinn? Renee Quinn?" the taller one asked. Calvin swallowed hard. "Yes." "We need to speak with both of you regarding a report of attempted fraudulent guardianship, forgery, and conspiracy to commit involuntary placement." Renee broke instantly. "This is a mistake," she cried. "We were helping her. She's confused. Dr. Linton interrupted gently but firmly. "Mrs. Quinn is not confused. You are." The officers stepped inside. One approached me. "Mrs. Quinn, would you like to provide a statement?" I met his eyes steadily. "I already have my attorney deliver the documentation this morning." He nodded respectfully. Meanwhile, the second officer turned back to Calvin and Renee. "We'll need you both to come with us for questioning." Renee's voice cracked into a screech. "She's doing this to punish us. We're family. She should be grateful." "Stop," I said. The room fell silent. I rose slowly from my chair and faced them, my son and daughter-in-law. You nearly took everything from me, I said quietly. My home, my freedom, my name. You plotted to drug me, silence me, and bury me in a place where no one would hear my voice. Calvin's face crumpled. Mom, I'm sorry. You're sorry now, I replied, because you've been caught. Renee lunged forward, fury replacing fear. You don't understand. We needed the money. I looked at her evenly. You needed greed, not money. An officer stepped between us. Ma'am, you'll need to calm down, he said to Renee. She sank into herself, sobbing violently. Calvin reached for her shoulders, but she pushed him away. You said this would work, she spat. You said she'd sign. You said no one would find out. Her confession echoed through the house. Calvin closed his eyes in defeat. The officers handcuffed Renee first. Her scream was sharp, desperate, unhinged. Then they turned to Calvin. He didn't resist, didn't argue, didn't even lift his eyes to meet mine. When they walked him toward the door, he whispered, barely audible, Mom, please don't let them take me. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't break. Because there are betrayals so deep that silence is the only answer. As they stepped outside, the morning sun flooded in, bright, almost blinding. The same house where they tried to erase me now witnessed their erasure. Dr. Linton gathered her papers. I'll file the final evaluation today. You're in the clear, Mrs. Quinn. I nodded. Thank you for seeing me. She paused, then said softly, No, thank you for fighting. When she left, the house fell into a hollow quiet, not peaceful, empty, like the echo left after a storm tears through and takes half the world with it. I stood there alone, staring at the doorway where my son had just disappeared in handcuffs. A mother's grief is a strange thing. It can break you and still burn you alive. But little did I know, the fallout had only begun. Within days, I would uncover something even darker, something I never expected Calvin to confess. The officers drove away, leaving a trail of dust in the morning light. I watched until the car disappeared, until the street returned to its quiet normal. But my heart was anything but normal. I should have felt victorious, safe, relieved, vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. My son had been led away in handcuffs, and though he deserved accountability, a part of me felt as if I had lost him long before the police ever arrived. The house, scrubbed and staged for their deception, suddenly felt too large, too quiet, too heavy. I walked slowly to the kitchen, needing water, needing something to anchor myself. But before I could reach the sink, my phone buzzed, unknown number. For a moment, I almost ignored it. But something, intuition maybe, made me answer. A shaky voice came through the line. Mom, it's me. I nearly dropped the phone. Calvin. A breath, a tremor, a raw, broken sound on the other end. They gave me one call, he whispered. They said I could call anyone. I called you. I leaned against the counter, my legs suddenly weak. Why? I asked, my voice almost trembling. Another breath. Because you're still my mother, and because there are things you don't know. I closed my eyes. Calvin, there is nothing you could say that would justify what you did. I'm not trying to justify it, he said quickly. I'm trying to explain it. His voice cracked, and the sound hit me harder than I expected. Mom, it didn't start with Airbnb rooms or forged papers. It started long before that. I said nothing. He continued. When Dad died, everything fell apart. Not just for you. For me too. I just never told you. The confession poured out, messy, tangled, painful. I lost my job 5 years ago. Before I told you I'd been promoted, before I told you everything was fine. My breath caught. What? Why didn't you? Because I didn't want you to think I was a failure, he whispered. You already lost, Dad. I didn't want you to lose faith in me, too. I sank into a chair. Calvin kept talking, words spilling faster. I tried to keep us afloat. The apartment, the bills, debt piled up. I hid it from Renee. I hid it from you. Then I took out a loan from the wrong people. I was desperate and stupid. My heart clenched. The ones who came after me weren't banks, he continued. They threatened to take everything. Our car, our savings, our safety. I told Renee the truth, and instead of helping, she created the plan. My eyes snapped open. She forced you, I whispered. No, he said painfully. She suggested it. She said you didn't use the house, that you were aging, that we deserved it more, that the world owed us a break. Calvin, my voice broke. And I believed her, he confessed. I believed every poison-tipped word because I was drowning, and instead of asking you for help, I tried to steal your life. Silence stretched between us, heavy, suffocating. Then Calvin whispered the final blow. Everything after that, the doctor, the papers, the lies, it was her idea. But it was my failure, Mom. I let it happen, I chose it. And now I've lost you. Tears slid down my face. I didn't wipe them away. Because sometimes truth hurts more than betrayal. But his confession wasn't the end. Because the next day I received a visit from someone who revealed the darkest part of Renee's plan. Something even Calvin didn't know. I barely slept that night. Calvin's confession kept replaying in loops, his voice ragged, his regret raw. The truth tangled with guilt and desperation. It didn't erase the betrayal, but it added a layer of heartbreak I wasn't prepared for. By morning, my eyes were swollen, my head aching. I tried making coffee, but even the familiar routine felt foreign. At 10:17 a.m., the doorbell rang. I flinched. Twice in 2 days. That doorbell had become an omen. When I opened the door, a man stood there. Tall, slender, mid-40s. Well-dressed, but not flashy. A messenger bag over his shoulder. Mrs. Quinn? He asked gently. Yes. He pulled out a business card and handed it to me. Marcus Harlan, private investigator. My stomach tightened. I know this is unexpected, he said softly, but I need to speak with you. It concerns your daughter-in-law and the case. I let him in without a word. Something in his voice felt serious, urgent, but not threatening. We sat at the dining table. Mr. Harlan placed a thin folder in front of him, but didn't open it yet. Mrs. Quinn, he began. I wasn't hired by you. I wasn't hired by your son either. I was working for someone else. My breath caught. For Renee, he added quietly. I slid down my spine. She hired me 5 months ago, he continued, under the pretense of investigating a family inheritance issue. But the more I learned, the more I realized something was wrong. Very wrong, I whispered. What did she hire you to find out? He exhaled slowly. She wanted your medical history, your banking patterns, your legal vulnerabilities, and any evidence she could use to argue you were mentally unstable. My chest tightened painfully. He continued. But Mrs. Quinn, that wasn't the darkest part. He opened the folder. Inside were screenshots, copies of emails, and a printed chat transcript. She was also communicating with a man named Dr. Vincetti, not the evaluator she planned to bring you to. Someone much more dangerous. I frowned. I don't know that name. You wouldn't, he replied. He lost his medical license 2 years ago for forging dementia evaluations for wealthy families trying to seize property. My blood ran cold. And Renee, he said, tapping one of the pages, tried to hire him illegally. She offered him $10,000 to create a fake medical file stating you are no longer capable of rational decision-making. Her words, not mine. My hands shook. But she had already arranged an appointment with Dr. Linton's office, I whispered. Yes, Mr. Holland said, leaning forward. Because her original plan failed. My heart dropped. What original plan? He slid a final page toward me. An email Renee had written 2 months earlier. I read the first line and felt the world tilt. If my mother-in-law were to have an accident, would the evaluation still be required for asset transfer? The air drained from my lungs. She planned to drug you long before the appointment, Mr. Harlan said gently. Not just confuse you. Hospitalize you. Make you appear cognitively compromised, a staged emergency. The room sank into suffocating silence. Not confusion, not manipulation, not coercion, elimination. Renee hadn't just wanted my house. She wanted my life to disappear neatly on paper. I clutched the edge of the table. My voice shook. Did Calvin know? No, Mr. Harlan said immediately. Your son knew about the fraud, the deception, the forged documents. But he was not aware of this. I'm sure of it. I closed my eyes, tears dripping down my cheeks. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had endangered me. And Calvin, my poor, foolish, desperate son, had married someone capable of destroying us both. And just when I thought I'd heard the worst, the investigator reached into his bag and revealed one last piece of evidence, something that changed everything I believed about my husband's death. When Mr. Harlan said he had one last piece of evidence, something in my chest tightened, as if my soul braced for impact. He reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a small envelope, sealed and yellowed at the edges. Not new, not recent, old. He set it on the table between us. This, he said gently, is something I didn't expect to find while investigating Renee. But once I did, I knew you deserved to know the truth. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. It was addressed in handwriting I recognized instantly. Elliot Quinn, my husband. The date? 13 months before he died. My throat closed. Where did you find this? I whispered. Mr. Harlan folded his hands. Renee had it in a private storage unit she rented under a false name. I believe she never opened it. There were several envelopes in a box, documents she was collecting. This was the only one addressed to you. My vision blurred. Why would she have something Elliot wrote for me? With shaking hands, I opened the letter. My husband's handwriting flowed across the page. Strong, steady, unmistakably his. And the words? The words ripped the floor from under me. My Belle. If you're reading this, it means my health has worsened faster than expected. My heartbeat roared in my ears. I have not told Calvin about the full extent of my condition. He worries easily, and I didn't want to burden him. But I need you to know the truth before anything happens to me. Something is wrong with our son. I stopped breathing. The next lines blurred through my tears. For months, I've seen changes in him. Gambling, debt, secrecy. Please don't tell him I knew. He would feel ashamed. I believe he is being manipulated by someone he trusts. My hands shook violently. Manipulated by someone he trusts. Renee. Even before Elliot passed, he had sensed it. Belle, If anything happens to me, be careful. Protect yourself. Our son loves you, but he is lost. His marriage, I don't trust it. I can't explain why, but something about her feels wrong. Wrong, he knew. My tears fell faster. If ever you feel unsafe, contact the attorney whose name I enclosed. He can protect our home. And Belle, no matter what happens, fight. Don't let grief turn into blindness. I pressed the letter against my heart. I felt like I was holding Elliot's voice, his warning, his love, his last attempt to shield me. When I looked up, Mr. Harlan's eyes were soft. "There's more," he said quietly. I stared at him, barely able to speak. "More?" He nodded and slid a second paper toward me. "I found this report in the same box. It's from the clinic where your husband had his last checkup. It was never filed in your insurance records." My chest tightened. "Why?" I whispered. "Because someone intercepted it." I unfolded the document. My hands froze. My blood ran cold. Elliot's heart condition, the one we all thought was sudden, had been improving, not worsening. His doctor had recommended a mild procedure and a follow-up plan, but there was no indication that he was dying. None. My breath shattered. "What are you saying?" I choked. Mr. Harlan's voice softened to a whisper. "Mrs. Quinn, your husband didn't pass naturally. Someone interfered with his treatment, and the signature authorizing the cancellation of his follow-up appointments," he slid one final page toward me, "was forged." My vision blurred. My stomach twisted. "And the handwriting," he said, "matches Renee's." A sound left my body, a mix of grief, rage, disbelief, and unfiltered heartbreak. My son hadn't just married a manipulative woman. He had married a woman capable of ending a life to gain control. My husband's life. Elliot had tried to warn me. He tried to protect me even from beyond the grave. And now, the truth had finally surfaced. But the most devastating part came the next morning, when Calvin called again and revealed the one truth that shattered everything I thought I knew about my husband's final days. I barely slept. Elliot's letter lay on my nightstand, its edges soft from the number of times my trembling fingers had traced his handwriting. The investigator's revelations pulsed through me, dark, heavy, suffocating. My husband hadn't died the way I believed. His treatment had been interrupted, his appointments canceled, his decline accelerated by someone else's hand, and the forged signature, Renee's. It was too much to absorb in one night. By dawn, my pillow was damp with tears I didn't even remember shedding. I was in the kitchen staring blankly at a cooling cup of tea when my phone rang. The screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize, but I knew instantly who it was. A correctional facility ID flashed across the top. I swallowed hard and answered, "Mom?" Calvin's voice, small, ragged, hollow, filtered through the speaker. I closed my eyes. "Yes, Calvin, I'm here." There was a shaky breath, then another. "Mom, I heard they questioned Renee. They told me she broke down and started talking. She didn't tell them the truth," I said quietly. "She told them the version that makes her look like a victim." Calvin exhaled in defeat. "Yeah, I figured." There was a long pause. Then his voice dropped to a whisper. "Mom, there's something else you need to know. I wasn't going to tell you. I thought keeping it buried would spare you pain. But after everything that's come out, you need the full truth." My heart clenched. "Calvin," I said softly, "I've already learned more than I thought I could bear." "This is about Dad," he whispered. My hand tightened around the phone. "I wasn't going to tell you," he repeated, But I can't keep it secret anymore. The air in the room thickened. What about your father? I breathed. Calvin's voice trembled in a way I had never heard before, like a man confessing to a sin he could never undo. The night before Dad died, he called me. My pulse kicked hard. I didn't tell you because I thought it was nothing. But now, Mom, now I think it was everything. Calvin, I whispered. What did he say? He breathed shakily, voice cracking mid-sentence. He told me he didn't feel right. He said his meds tasted different. A shockwave ran through my body. He wanted me to come over. He said something felt wrong in his chest, not like before. He said he couldn't reach you. You were at your painting class. I remembered that night clearly. It was the only class I'd taken all month, Calvin continued, voice hollow with guilt. I told him I'd come over in the morning instead. I thought he was just anxious. I told him to rest. My vision blurred. Calvin, I whispered, but Mom... His voice broke. When he said he couldn't reach you, he also said he didn't trust calling the house phone. He didn't want Renee to hear. My blood froze solid. He said he felt watched. My hand flew to my mouth. I could barely breathe. And now, Calvin whispered, after everything I've seen, after hearing what Renee told the officers during questioning. What did she say? I asked, my voice barely working. Calvin swallowed audibly. She admitted she'd been adjusting Dad's medications. She said it was only meant to make him weaker, not... His voice shattered. Not kill him. Silence filled the space between us, deep, hollow, devastating. I should have told you he called me, Calvin whispered through tears. I should have gone to him. I should have checked on him. I thought I had time. He broke into sobs, raw, uncontrolled, agonizing, and my heart, already cracked, broke into pieces. Not because I forgave him, not because the pain had faded, but because the truth was now undeniable. My husband didn't die alone. He died reaching for the two people he trusted most. One didn't come, and the other was the reason he never saw morning. And yet, even with all these revelations, there was one final twist waiting for me. The last thing Elliot left behind, hidden in a place only I would ever find. After Calvin's call ended, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, motionless, breath shallow, staring at nothing and seeing everything, my husband's warning. His altered medication, his canceled appointments, his fear, his final call, his death. All of it now made a kind of terrible sense. Grief, betrayal, guilt, love. They twisted together inside me like a storm with no center. My heart felt bruised, as if every truth uncovered left another mark. By late afternoon, I couldn't sit anymore. The walls felt too close, the silence too loud. I needed air, I needed movement. I wandered through the house, my house, touching the furniture Elliot built, the photos he hung, the memories he left behind like footprints in the dust. Every room felt haunted, but not by ghosts, by truth. As I entered our old bedroom, something pulled me to a stop, not a sound, not a vision, just a feeling. A tug in the chest, a whisper in the heart, a sense that something of Elliot's remained unfinished. I walked to his side of the room, to the old wooden dresser he'd polished every Sunday morning. My fingers drifted over the drawers. Then I paused. The bottom drawer, the one he always kept locked, sat slightly ajar. A chill ran through me. No one had used this room in months. No one had touched his dresser. Why would this drawer be open? With trembling hands, I knelt and pulled it out gently. Inside, tucked beneath his scarves and worn leather wallet was a small wooden box, one I'd seen before. A keepsake box he'd once told me was for something special. He never said what. My breath caught as I lifted it out. It was heavier than I remembered. The lid creaked softly when I opened it. Inside was a stack of envelopes tied with a thin navy ribbon, and on top, a single folded note in Elliot's handwriting. My knees nearly gave out. The note read, "Belle, if something ever happens to me, and if you feel unsafe, uncertain, or alone, open these letters in order. They will tell you everything you need to know." My eyes filled instantly. With shaking hands, I untied the ribbon. The first envelope was labeled, "Letter 1, the things I couldn't say while I was still here." Inside, Elliot's words flowed like water, gentle, steady, heartbreakingly tender. "You were always the strong one, Belle. And I know the burden of truth is heavier than any lie. So I left you the truth in pieces, small enough to hold, but powerful enough to guide you when I no longer can." I pressed the page to my chest, sobbing quietly. But as I set the letter down, something else caught my eye. At the bottom of the box was a key, small, brass, worn smooth at the edges. Attached was a tag. For the locker I never told anyone about. Stared locker? Locker. On the back of the tag was a location scribbled in Elliot's hurried handwriting. A place I hadn't been in years. A place only meaningful to us. A place where apparently my husband had hidden a final truth, one even Renee never discovered. My heart pounded. My breath quickened. Elliot was gone, but his voice, his guidance was still leading me. But what I found inside that locker was not just a message. It was the secret Elliot protected with his life. One that would change everything about who I thought he was, and who I needed to become. I didn't wait, didn't rest, didn't breathe normally for hours. As soon as I found the key, something inside me surged awake, as if Elliot himself had taken my trembling hand and whispered, "Go now, Belle. You've waited long enough." By dusk, I was already in Mr. Harlow's car, the little brass key clutched in my palm so tightly it left a mark. He didn't ask questions. Bless him. He never asked unless I was ready to speak. The locker's location was scribbled on the tag. Station 7 Storage Unit 14B. Station 7. The small, run-down storage site a few miles out of town. The same place Elliot and I rented briefly when we renovated the house years ago. A place Renee would never think to look. A place Calvin probably didn't even remember existed. A place where secrets could sleep for years. The moment we pulled in, the air felt different. Heavy with time, thick with dust and echoes. Rows of metal doors stretched in both directions, each one faded and dented by age. Unit 14B sat near the back, half hidden behind an overgrown hedge. I walked toward it slowly, each step feeling like a heartbeat. Click, click, click. The key slid into the lock. My hands shook. With one final breath, I turned it. The bolt snapped open. I lifted the door, and the metal groaned upward, releasing a cold draft that smelled like dust, cardboard, and memories long undisturbed inside. A single wooden trunk sat in the center of the room. Nothing else. No boxes, no furniture, no clutter. Just the trunk. My heart hammered Mr. Harlow. Placed a hand on my shoulder. "Take your time, Maribel." But I couldn't wait anymore. I knelt beside the trunk and lifted the lid. What I found inside didn't make sense at first. There were no love letters, no sentimental keepsakes, no hospital reports or medical revelations. Instead, I saw a ledger book. A stack of bank statements, a burner phone, a flash drive, and a folder labeled in Elliot's handwriting, "Private, for Belle only." My pulse quickened. I opened the folder first. Inside were pages of numbers, transactions, lists, and names I didn't recognize. "What is all this?" I whispered. Mr. Harlow peered closer, brows narrowing. "These look like financial transfers, large ones." He flipped a page, and then his breath caught Maribel. "These signatures here, these aren't Elliot's." A cold shiver ran up my spine. I stared harder. The handwriting on multiple documents was familiar. Not from Elliot, from Renee. Bank transfers, account closures, redirected pension payments, insurance withdrawals. Some dated months before Elliot died. Some dated years before. And then, near the bottom of the stack, an authorization slip for a private insurance policy I didn't know existed. $420,000. Beneficiary: Calvin Quinn. Not me. But the signature approving it? It was forged. By the same hand that forged Elliot's medical papers. My breath left my body. Renee had been funneling money out of our accounts long before Elliot's health declined. She'd placed herself between us like a parasite, quietly draining us for years. This wasn't desperation. This was premeditated control. I opened the ledger book next. Inside, on the very first page, Elliot had written, "Belle, if you found this, then the danger I feared has arrived. Protect yourself. Protect our son. The enemy is not his heart, it is hers." I covered my mouth, a cry tearing from my throat. He knew. He had known all along. And the burner phone. When I turned it on, a single unsent message sat in drafts from Elliot, addressed to me. "Belle, if anything happens to me, go to Unit 14B. You must finish what I could not." Tears blurred the screen. My husband hadn't died confused. He hadn't died unaware. He died fighting to leave me a trail. One his killer never thought he had the strength to create. But what I didn't know yet was that the flash drive in the trunk held the final piece. Video footage Elliot recorded in secret. Footage that would reveal the moment everything changed. The flash drive lay at the bottom of the trunk. Small, black, and unremarkable. If I hadn't known Elliot's handwriting, I might have missed the tiny strip of tape wrapped around it, labeled faintly, "For Belle, only if necessary." My heart twisted. For Elliot to write "only if necessary" meant he feared a danger greater than pride, greater than embarrassment, greater than any marital secret. He meant danger to life. I slipped the drive into my pocket, my fingers trembling as if carrying something alive. Mr. Harlow helped me lock the storage unit and guided me back to the car. The drive home was silent. Neither of us spoke, not because there was nothing to say, but because words felt too small for the weight of what we had found. When we reached my house, I felt frozen at the doorway, unable to cross the threshold. This house held decades of memories, but now it also held unanswered questions. Questions Elliot had tried to protect me from Mr. Harlow. Touched my shoulder gently. "You don't have to watch it alone." I nodded once, but I knew I must. So, I sank into my old armchair, the one where Elliot used to read his newspapers, and plugged the flash drive into my laptop. A single video file appeared, no title, no date, just Rick 001. I clicked play. The screen flickered. For a moment, all I heard was Elliot's breath, slow, shaky, deliberate. Then the camera steadied and my husband's face filled the screen. A wave of emotion hit me so hard I pressed a hand to my chest. He looked tired, thinner than I remembered, but his His eyes held the same determined softness that had always anchored me. He cleared his throat. Belle, if you're watching this, then I didn't get to warn you in time. My hand trembled over my mouth. I don't want you to be afraid, he continued, but I need you to be aware. He drew in a deep breath. She's been tampering with things around the house, my medication, my appointments, even my keys. Renee. His voice shook. I confronted her once. She denied it with a smile that chilled me. That was when I realized she's not doing this alone. My throat closed. Calvin is struggling, he whispered. He thinks she's helping him, but she's isolating him, controlling him, using his weaknesses to bend him. Elliot leaned closer to the camera. Belle, please don't blame him. Not completely. He's drowning, and she's handing him stones instead of rope. Tears streamed down my face. He exhaled shakily. I'm recording this because I think she's planning something, an accident, perhaps something that cannot be undone. My whole body went cold. I've hidden the documents, the proof, everything you'll need. Please, protect yourself and protect our boy if they're still away. His voice cracked. I love you, Belle. I always have. And I'm so sorry I couldn't stay longer to protect you myself. The screen went black. I stared at the dark display until my reflection blurred behind tears. Because for the first time, I realized Elliot hadn't died unaware. He died fighting for me. He died leaving breadcrumbs. He died trying to save the son we both loved, even from himself. As I closed the laptop, something inside me hardened, not with bitterness, but with resolve. But little did I know. The moment this video surfaced, it set off a chain reaction, one that would bring Renee back into my life in the most unexpected, terrifying way. I didn't leave the armchair for hours. Elliot's face, his voice, his warning. It echoed inside me long after the screen went dark. His final message unlocked something I hadn't felt in months. Strength. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady, unshakable. The kind that comes from truth. When night fell, I finally moved. I made myself tea, turned on the porch light, tried to ground myself in simple things. But the house felt different now. Not haunted, but awakened. Every corner held meaning. Every shadow held memory. For the first time since Elliot died, I wasn't afraid of the dark in my home. I was afraid of the truth outside it. Around 10:40 p.m., I heard a noise on the porch. A soft shuffle. A step too heavy to be a stray animal. Too cautious to be a neighbor. My heart tightened. I walked slowly toward the door. Not trembling, not weak. Ready. I flicked the porch light brighter, and there she was. Renee. Her hair unkempt, mascara smudged, wearing a coat too thin for the cold. She looked nothing like the polished woman who once strutted through my hallways. Her edges were frayed, her bravado gone. For a moment, she didn't see me through the screen door. She was pacing, muttering to herself, clutching a handful of papers, then her eyes snapped up and locked on mine. Something like relief flickered across her face. Maribel, she whispered. Hearing my name in her voice felt like poison. I didn't open the door. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice controlled. She swallowed hard. They let me out on bail. I said nothing. She took a shaky step forward. I need to explain. No, I said sharply. Not again. Not another lie. Her face contorted, frustration breaking through her fear. This wasn't supposed to happen, she hissed. You weren't supposed to find... She stopped herself abruptly, as if realizing she'd revealed too much. My throat tightened. You mean I wasn't supposed to find Elliot's documents? I asked coldly. Or the storage unit, the forged transfers, the video? Her eyes widened. Video? I nodded once. Renee's composure shattered. She stumbled back a step, gripping the railing. He recorded something? She whispered, voice trembling. And he left it for me, I said. Everything. Renee shook her head rapidly, panic rising. No. He promised he wouldn't. She froze. I stepped closer to the door. What did he promise you, Renee? Silence. Her lips parted. Her eyes darted to the street, as if expecting someone to drag her away. Finally, she whispered, voice trembling with a truth she had fought too long to bury. Elliot confronted me. He told me he knew what I was doing, but he said he wouldn't destroy the family, that he wouldn't expose me if I left things alone. My chest tightened painfully. But you didn't leave things alone, I said. A tear slid down her cheek. He trusted me to stop. And instead, I said softly, you hastened his death. Renee broke. She sank onto the porch steps, sobbing silently, shoulders shaking. But I didn't move to comfort her. Some wounds aren't meant to be mended, just acknowledged. She finally lifted her face, eyes swollen. Maribel, please, if the video gets out, I lose everything. You already lost everything, I said quietly. She stared at me, empty, defeated. And then she whispered the words that chilled me more than anything else. You don't understand. There are people involved in this who won't let that video see daylight. My pulse spiked. What people? She looked over her shoulder, terrified. The ones who helped me. The ones who expected payment. The ones who... A car engine roared in the distance. Renee flinched violently. They're coming, she whispered. My breath stopped. Who's coming? She looked at me with broken, desperate eyes. Not for me, for you. And before I could even process her warning, headlights turned onto my street. And the dark truth Elliot died trying to uncover finally stepped into the light. The headlights appeared at the far end of the street, slow, deliberate, too steady to be lost or wandering. They weren't the frantic movements of a neighbor returning late, nor the meandering glide of a delivery truck. This car knew exactly where it was going. Renee's breath hitched. There's no time, she whispered hoarsely. We have to go inside, now. Against every instinct telling me to slam the door in her face, I unlocked it and stepped back. Not for her, for Elliot, for the truth he died protecting. She stumbled into the hallway, hugging her coat, eyes darting wildly around the living room like a cornered animal. I shut the door quietly, but not fully. I needed to listen. The car crept closer, its engine purring low like a predator stalking in tall grass. My fingers tightened around the edge of the door. Renee paced behind me, whispering to herself. Oh God, they weren't supposed to come here. They were supposed to go after the drive, after the accounts. Her rambling snapped something inside me. Renee, I said sharply, look at me. She froze. Who is in that car? She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the vehicle finally rolled to a stop right in front of my house. The engine cut. The porch light reflected off the black windshield, giving me no view inside. A chill crawled up my neck. Renee's voice trembled. They're the ones who helped me access Elliot's financial accounts, the ones who handled the forged documents. They wanted a cut after Calvin got control of your estate. My stomach twisted. And you promised them money, I said slowly. Money you never intended to share. She nodded, swallowing hard. They don't like when people change the plan. The car door opened. A figure stepped out, tall, male, wearing a dark coat. He walked with unnerving calm, as if he owned the very ground beneath him. I didn't flinch. I stepped fully onto the porch and shut the door behind me. If they were coming for me, they would have to look me in the eyes. He approached the steps, finally stepping into the glow of the porch light. His face was sharp, expression unreadable. "Mrs. Quinn?" he said smoothly as if greeting a client. "We've been looking for you." My spine stiffened. I wasn't hiding. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. Cold. Professional. No, but someone was keeping secrets from us. His eyes flicked toward the door. "Your daughter-in-law, for example." I said nothing. He stepped closer. "We understand you have some materials that belong to us." "Nothing in this house belongs to you," I replied evenly. His jaw tightened just slightly. "That video," he said quietly, "complicates things." There it was. The reason Elliot recorded it. The reason he whispered if necessary. Renee cracked the door open behind me just enough to listen. The man's eyes darted past me, narrowing. "Renee," he said coolly, "you should come outside." She whimpered and retreated deeper into the house. He took another step up the porch. "Mrs. Quinn, we need that flash drive." "And what would you do with it?" I asked softly. "Make sure it never surfaces." There was a pause. Then I lifted my chin. "My husband died trying to leave that truth behind. I won't bury it for you." His smile vanished. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Something cold flickered in his gaze. And then, from the side of the house, bright lights exploded across the porch. Police floodlights. A voice shouted, "Hands where we can see them!" The man spun around. Startled, Renee screamed inside. And from behind the squad cars, stepping forward in uniform, Calvin, handcuffed, escorted, but yelling, "She's my mother! Don't let him near her!" My world tilted. Everything happened at once. Officers grabbed the man. Another team rushed to the porch. Renee burst into hysterics. Calvin fought against his restraints, shouting for them to protect me. And I stood there in the middle of the chaos, strangely calm, because for the first time, I understood. Elliot hadn't just left me with clues, he had left me with courage. But even as the police swept in and the danger tightened its grip, the darkest truth of all was still waiting, hidden not in documents, not in a locker, but in what Elliot feared most about our son. The porch became a storm of flashing lights, shouted commands, and heavy boots pounding against the wooden steps. Officers swarmed the man in the dark coat, forcing him to the ground. He didn't fight, not out of surrender, but out of calculation. Predators don't panic, they wait. I stood frozen as they cuffed him, my breath coming in shallow waves. Renee collapsed inside the doorway, sobbing uncontrollably, and Calvin, my son, was struggling against the officers who held him, his face drenched in tears. "Mom," he cried, "are you okay? Mom, say something." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Everything was too loud, too bright, too real. Finally, an officer guided me to a chair on the porch. "Mrs. Quinn, you're safe now. We've been monitoring activity near your property all day." "Monitoring?" My voice cracked. "Why?" The officer exchanged a look with his partner. "We were contacted by an elder law attorney earlier," he explained. "She said you'd uncovered evidence and that there might be retaliation." My attorney always 3 steps ahead. I exhaled shakily. Then I looked up, straight into Calvin's eyes. And in that instant, I felt something shift. He wasn't the calculated manipulator I had seen in the last weeks. He wasn't the desperate man cornered by greed. He was my son, flawed, lost, terrified, and still capable of loving me. Maybe too late, but still. Let him go, I whispered. The officers paused. He's not the danger, I said firmly. She. I glanced at Renee. And the men behind her are. They slowly released him, though his wrists remained bound. He ran to me immediately, falling to his knees at my feet. Mom, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I swear I didn't know they would come here. I never wanted you hurt, I never meant... I placed a hand on his cheek. Calvin, I said softly, we'll talk, but not now. He nodded, choking on a sob. Behind us, officers dragged the dark-coated man into their car. His eyes met mine through the window. Still cold, still unreadable. But underneath that calm, I sensed something else. Recognition, not of me, but of Elliot. He knew my husband. My stomach twisted as a memory surfaced. Elliot mentioning months before he fell ill that a new advisor Calvin had met seemed suspicious, someone he didn't trust. Someone too interested in our finances. Had this man been circling our family long before Renee ever entered the picture? A chill ran through me. Then the lead officer approached with a solemn expression. Mrs. Quinn, he said quietly, there's something we found in the suspect's car. He handed me a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a phone. Not Renee's, not Calvin's, a different phone, with a cracked screen. Why give this to me, I asked. Because, the officer said, lowering his voice, there's a message on it, one recorded months ago. From your husband? The world narrowed to a single point. Elliot, I whispered. The officer nodded. We don't know how they got this phone, but the timestamp matches the period right before your husband's health declined. My legs nearly gave out. Calvin grabbed my arm, steadying me. Mom, what is it? I couldn't answer. With trembling fingers, I unlocked the evidence bag and lifted the phone. There was only one saved file, one recording, a message Elliot recorded. Not for the police, not for lawyers, not for himself, but for me. I tapped the file. His voice filled the night air. Belle, if you're hearing this, then the danger wasn't stopped in time. And I need you to know the truth, not about Renee, but about Calvin. I froze. The officers froze. Even the wind seemed to stop moving. Elliot continued. Your heart will want to blame her for everything, but I need you to understand. Our son wasn't just manipulated. A trembling breath. He was involved long before he realized how deep he'd fallen. My pulse pounded. Calvin's face drained of color. Elliot's voice grew faint, but devastatingly clear. Belle, please forgive him. He never meant for me to die. The phone slipped from my fingers. Calvin stared at me, shattered. And I realized the darkest truth Elliot left behind was not the betrayal in this house, but the forgiveness he asked of me just moments before he died. And as Calvin broke down beside me, I understood. The next step wasn't about uncovering more secrets. It was about deciding whether forgiveness was even possible. Calvin fell to the ground, as if Elliot's voice had knocked the strength out of his legs. He stared at the phone in my hand, his eyes wide, glassy, terrified. Mom, please, he whispered. I didn't know he recorded that. I didn't know. His voice cracked into a sob. I knelt slowly beside him. My knees ached, my hands trembled, but my heart was a storm, not of anger, not of pity. Something deeper, a mix of grief, disbelief, and the impossible love only a mother can still feel after being betrayed. Calvin, I said quietly, look at me. He lifted his head, broken, ashamed. "I never wanted him dead," he choked. "I swear it. I messed up. I messed up so badly, but I didn't. I would never." His voice dissolved. I reached out and touched his cheek the way I did when he was small and scared after thunderstorms. "Tell me everything," I whispered, not as a judge, as his mother. He wiped his face with trembling hands. "It started before Renee," he said softly. "Before the marriage. I got into trouble, bad debt. People started threatening me. I didn't know what to do, so when Renee offered to help, I believed her." He swallowed hard. "She told me Dad was wasting money, that he was too old to manage things, that we could reorganize everything and pay off the debts before anyone noticed." My breath caught. "Calvin," I whispered. I know," he said desperately. "I was stupid. I was drowning, and she made everything sound easy, like a fix. And when Dad found out, he confronted her." My heart thudded painfully. "He told her to stay away from me," Calvin continued. "He told her he'd expose everything, that he'd take legal action." I felt the world tilt. "And she panicked," Calvin whispered. "She said if Dad shut everything down, those men would come after me again harder. She said we'd both be ruined." I closed my eyes. "So, you helped her," I said quietly. He shook his head quickly. "No, not like that. I didn't help her hurt him. I didn't know she would touch his medication. I didn't know she would do anything physical. She told me she'd talk to him, calm him down. I believed her." His voice cracked in half. "She locked me out, Mom. She kept me out of everything when things started getting worse. She said it was too stressful for me. I didn't know until it was too late." A tear rolled down his cheek. "I swear to you, I never wanted him gone." The night air pressed around us like a held breath. Officers lingered nearby, listening but silent. I studied my son's face. The same face Elliot once cupped gently when teaching him how to ride a bike. The same face that cried when he graduated. The same face that had gotten lost somewhere along the way. Broken, imperfect, misled, but not evil. Not the monster I'd feared he'd become. I touched his hand. "Calvin," I whispered, "your father didn't blame you." A sob tore out of him. "He asked me to forgive you," I continued, "even as he was dying." Calvin folded into me, crying like he did as a little boy. Raw, desperate, aching. And as I held him, the question burned quietly inside me. Could I forgive him? Not today, not easily, maybe not entirely. But Elliot's voice echoed in my heart like a soft, persistent truth. "Belle, he is still our son." I closed my eyes. Not forgiving him wouldn't undo the past, but forgiving him one day might save his future. But forgiveness would have to wait, because as the officers wrapped up the scene, one of them approached me with a final revelation from Elliot's phone. Something that changed the path ahead for all of us. The officers finally finished their sweep of the property, taking statements, collecting evidence, and securing the man they arrested. The flashing lights quieted. The porch returned to shadow, and the night settled into a heavy stillness. I was exhausted, soul tired, bone tired. But something told me the night wasn't finished with me yet. "Mrs. Quinn," one of the officers said softly, stepping forward. "There's one more thing." I braced myself. I didn't think I could handle anything more. He held out Elliot's recovered phone, the one taken from the man now in custody. "We extracted a second file," he said quietly. "A message Elliot recorded just minutes after his first one." A fresh wave of grief hit me like a fist. "Do you want to listen now?" he asked gently. "Or would you prefer to wait until morning?" I shook my head. "No. I need to hear him Now. He placed the phone in my hands, then stepped back to give me space. I swallowed, pressed play, and Elliot's voice filled the air once again. Belle, if you're hearing this second message, it means the danger has reached you. His voice was weaker this time, a rasp, a strain I hadn't heard before. I don't know how much time I have left, but I need to tell you one more thing. I felt Calvin tense beside me. Elliot continued. Our son is not lost beyond saving. A shaky breath. He is a good man caught in a very bad net. If you can help him out of it, do. Not for me. For him. My throat tightened. And Belle, his voice cracked. Don't let her take your kindness away. Your strength comes from loving deeply, not blindly, not foolishly, but bravely. Tears blurred my vision. Whatever happens next, don't let this family break. Help it bend. Help it heal. A long pause. You were always the one strong enough to do that. The recording ended. The night fell silent around us. Calvin let out a ragged sob next to me. The sound of a son crushed under the weight of a truth he couldn't undo, yet desperate to rebuild what remained, I closed my eyes. Elliot wasn't asking me to forget. He wasn't asking me to erase the pain. He was asking me for something harder, to choose healing where destruction had almost taken root. I turned to Calvin. He met my gaze, broken, terrified, hopeful. Mom, he whispered, I want to make this right. I don't know how, but I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy, pay my debts, take responsibility. I'll do whatever you ask. Just don't give up on me. I took his hands in mine. You will make things right, I said softly. Not for me, not even for your father. For yourself. His body shook as he cried. I held him the way Elliot once held both of us. Inside the house, Renee sat in handcuffs, her face hollow and empty. She would face justice for what she'd done. The courts would handle her now, not my heart. As the officers prepared to leave, I looked out at the night sky, dark but steady, like a curtain finally lowered after a long, brutal play. Elliot was gone, but his love remained. His courage remained. His wisdom remained. And so did I. The next days would be hard. There would be court hearings, statements, long hours of unraveling the damage. There would be grief. There would be healing. But for the first time in a long time, there would also be hope. I stepped into my house, my home, knowing one truth. Elliot didn't just leave me a warning. He left me a path forward, and I was strong enough to walk it.